Welcome to Book Club. We are talking about the book Deep Work by Newport. If you didn't read it, I'm glad you're here because I don't really think you need to read the entire book. I pulled the principles out of it for us that I think are the most important, and the rest of it was supporting material. So the overall book is really dialed down to one thing, which is when can you do deep work, which is much of what we're missing. And so today, we're going to talk about what is the definition of deep work, what's the definition of shallow work, and what's my favorite thing, busyness that we all do to call ourselves productive, or we're using our time and doing busy things instead of deep work. And so that's what we're going to go through. And like I said, let's experiment with screen share today, shall we? And I am going to toggle back and forth. Let me get this up here. And then, oh, I can still see you guys. That's exciting. Okay, present. Can you see my screen? Not if you can see the screen. Oh, look at us go. Okay. So these are our three concepts that we are going to talk about: busyness and multitasking, which are tasks that we do that we often mistake as being productive. So I don't know. For me, I can make a long list of things I'm going to do today, and I can do them and then be like, I was so productive today. And in relation to my work and making progress in work, I likely was not. If my day is full of these busy things, a lot of them are actually tasks that I don't even really need to do right now, but I'm doing them because I want to feel productive. So we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Shallow work, non-demanding, easy to do tasks that you could even do distracted. You could do them while listening to something. You could do them while your kids are probably around if you needed to, but you could get them done. And there's a mix of work items that could fall in here. And hopefully you're starting to think of what some of these things are. And then really the focus of today, deep work, professional activities performed without distraction. But here's the other part, that push our cognitive abilities. So this is the challenge. And we all know we have these things, especially in business, that we don't know how to do, or we need to learn them. We need to have full focus to write a newsletter, or to edit the podcast, or to do client work that we want to do that requires deeper thinking. And that's where we're headed. So I wanted to start with this quote, and I actually just want you to close your eyes and I'm going to read it to you. And I just want you to feel this quote from the book. When you switch from task A to another task B, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of your attention remains stuck, thinking about the original task. This residue gets especially thick if your work on task A was unbounded and of low intensity before you switched. But even if you finish task A before moving on, your attention remains divided for a while. So before we move on from here, I'm going to stop the share for a moment. All right, let's go to the chat. What does that quote mean to you? So it's a quote about switching tasks. How does that show up for you? What does it mean for you? Tell me your thoughts about that quote. Type them in the chat and then I will read them for all of us. I'll read that when Kelly's done. Okay, so first one, it rings very true for my standard work. It's hard for me to switch gears and feel like I'm doing my best work. Yes. Also, 100%. This happens when I shift my inward attention to my daughters coming in and asking me questions all the time. I don't start truly listening to them until they are halfway through their thought. Yes. Also makes sense because in that moment, you're being interrupted and your brain is still like tingling over here. It's like, wait a moment when you walk in the door and then like, I gotta play catch up. I gotta get to you before we can move on. Yeah. All right. Let's go back to our screen share. So we're going to talk about this busyness idea first, which I was only laughing so hard when I wrote this. It's like, this is what I do all day, honestly. And then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, yeah, I did it. And then I look at my things that are important and I didn't do those things, truly. So this quote also came from the book, which I thought was true. Busyness as proxy for productivity. In the absence of clear indicators of what it means to be productive and valuable in their jobs, many knowledge workers turn back towards an industrial indicator of productivity, doing lots of stuff in a visible manner. Right. So the two things that really stuck out to me are in the absence of clear indicators of what it means to be productive and valuable. So in a workplace setting, this shows up as like, you don't know what your expectations in your role are. You don't know what you need to do every day. You're sort of just like floating around. So then you flitter around to get stuff done to look productive, or the idea that an 8-hour workday is what's most productive when, you know, a lot of studies have shown, honestly, you get 5 hours of work out of people in 8 because the rest of the time they don't really know what to do. So they're filling their time. And so when we don't really know what we're doing, which happens to me, which is why we're focusing on like, what is your one thing per month or what are your main objectives? So that when you feel this pull towards busyness, you can say, okay, but what are my actual indicators that I want to show as being productive instead of just puttering around? Makes sense for busyness? All right. So before we move to the next one, if you want to take notes, otherwise you can do both, put them in the chat, take notes. What do you do in a work day that you would actually consider busyness that you're using as productiveness? What are some of those things? So a few things. We have checking and replying to emails and texts from clients. Yes. Like I need to check my phone. I need to check my email. What happens after that is a whole nother thing, but I need to check it. Social media check-ins last far longer than a simple actual check-in. Social media viewing and posting. So it's interesting that social media falls into this bucket. And he has an entire chapter called Quit Social Media. And I just don't agree. I just can't agree with that factor for many reasons, but we're going to talk more down the road about how that could look. And again, boundaries. But busyness for me shows up in my workday like, oh, I should definitely do laundry. Yep, do laundry. Yes, I should also do the dishes. Yes, I should also sweep my floor. So for me, it's like these chores. Since I'm home, I create them as an avoidance tactic, as a busyness during my workday when I don't actually really want to be doing them, but I'm not clear really on what I should be doing. So I fill my time with busyness. Anything else about busyness as proxy for productivity? All right. So shallow work, I find to be a little confusing, but I want us to start thinking about what do you think the shallow work is in your day-to-day work life. So we are focusing on tasks that you do during work that could be considered shallow. So let's go back. Let's see if I can even toggle back. Oh, yes. Non-demanding, easy to do tasks that you could do while distracted. What might fall into this camp? And put some of those in the chat as well. So these are likely going to be actual work tasks. And while distracted, for me, tends to show up like, oh, I want to listen to this podcast. Or it kind of crosses the line a little bit for me as well for my busyness, which is, well, I can put in laundry and then while that's going, I'll do X, Y, Z. So this could be a little mismatch, but what does your shallow work consist of? And this is work specific. We're also going to talk, like the thing says, about life shallow tasks. All right, so we have work, laundry, cleaning office, again, emailing, texting clients, reminders, tasks around the house for the family and myself, in between things I'm doing for my business. The wording here is all very important. Client check-ins, emails, educational reading, resources. Okay, keep these spinning in your brain. So now we're going to talk about deep work, and I'm going to read you these 4 quotes. If you just want to kind of meditate and listen to them, I just want you to internalize them for a second, because this is where we're going to really talk about deep work. So these are all quotes from the book. To learn hard things quickly, you must focus intensely without distraction. So that's the first one. The key to developing a deep work habit is to move beyond good intentions and add routines and rituals to your working life designed to minimize the amount of your limited willpower necessary to transition and maintain a state of unbroken concentration. That one's really big. We're going to come back to all of these, but we're going to read them all first. In order to produce the absolute best stuff you're capable of, you need to commit to deep work. And the fourth one, human beings, it seems, are at their best when immersed deeply in something challenging. So I don't know about you, but the one where I felt very attacked is this long one on the left side over here. The one about moving beyond good intentions. This is where I stop. I have good intentions. Intuitively, I think we all know what deep work is, and we all know we need to do it without interruption. But going from your good intentions to actually doing it, that's its own journey, which we're going to talk about. And then minimizing the amount of your limited willpower. That I thought was really powerful as well, because if you think about how much time you spend during doing that task switching that we talked about in the very beginning, that A to B, and then you have residual thoughts of everything. If you're doing that all day, you have to have so much willpower to try to come back to something over and over and over versus finding a routine, a ritual, and a time. And this is not like you need 7 hours in a day. He gave an example in the book where he said, he was talking to this writer who he was at his house for a day or two visiting, and he would just go upstairs and leave the group, and he'd be up there for like 45 minutes, but he was writing. And then he would come back down and he would join the group. 45 minutes was his deep work time. There were no distractions. Nobody went with him. He didn't take his email. He didn't take his phone. He just went and he wrote for 45 minutes. And I think the lesson from that is also, you don't need as much time as you think you do if you did it without distraction. If you did it with a routine, if you did it on purpose versus waiting for the opportunity to come, or like, I'll be so inspired tomorrow to do that work. And then it just doesn't happen. Any takeaways on really those 4 quotes before we talk about how do you actually do this? What was your biggest takeaway from any of those 4? Because like I said, mine was the one on the bottom left about moving past intention. All right, so one comment. I think of my daughter getting her homework done. She really struggles with focus and keeping distractions at bay. I think the missing link is the commitment to just doing it. Yes. And then how, when, and all the things on the next slide. The hard things quickly resonated, especially since I'm currently trying to increase my knowledge in a specific work area. Yes, 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 yes. Very much so. Because we don't want to spend our entire life trying to learn a thing. We could actually learn it quickly if we dedicated time, attention, and focus. Yes. Okay. So there's 4 concepts of, let's see, I have to move you guys on my screen. The 4 disciplines, he says in his book, about deep work and how to do it. And the next couple slides sort of go together. So we're going to go through this and then also to the next one. So it has to be wildly important, which I thought was interesting. A very small number of ambitious goals. And this is what we talked about in the beginning of January. I tried to sort of prep you for this, which is you only need 1 or 2 focus items. And if within your life focus item, you know, like Kelly shared with us in January, that might be really the only one, but you need something to be wildly important to you. And it needs to be a very small number of ambitious goals. The second, act on lead measures. So instead of, he called them lag measures, measuring time spent actually in your deep work towards your goal, instead of all the times that you didn't do it, which duh, but also yes. So monitoring yourself, which I am personally seemingly averse to that, like, but numbers don't lie. Tracking doesn't lie. We know this with our clients in many aspects. The third was having a compelling scoreboard, like an adult sticker chart. Some of these things just never stop working. So what is it that would compel you to track your progress? What compels you to track how much deep work you have? And then how much deep work might you need for these wildly ambitious goals? And then the fourth one, create your own system of check-ins and accountability. So who, what, how, why do you need to make these happen? If it is actually 45 minutes once a week, who are you going to check in with that, or how? Can you track that time yourself? Do you need a motivator? You know, when I was writing my graduate paper, I told myself I could go to this special coffee shop and get a fancy coffee if I wrote my paper there. And I always had a time that I was there because it could only be X number of hours. And it really was only X number of days per week. And so the check-in was with my mentor for my paper. My sticker chart really for me, how I wanted to track it was how many lattes I could drink. Honestly, like if I went, I got a latte, sometimes even breakfast. And then I would track how many days that I went and how much work I got done for this one goal. So it doesn't have to be regimented and super formal, but it does have to have these elements. This goes with the next one. Let me get to the next screen. So the main thing in the book he talked about is ritualize. So those are your 4 disciplines. And I said these 2 slides are going to go together, which is how are you going to do it? Where? And how long? and what kind of support. So let's actually really talk about this. I want you to think about 1 day per week, not even a lot. Do you have one time per week? And let's even call it 1 hour. Let's just be very simple. Do you have 1 hour on 1 day a week? And I want you to think of when that might be. How can you ritualize your time for deep work? So in the book, you talked about, a special place. Do you need to leave your house? Not if you have children that you can't leave, but do you need to be in your office? Do you need to be at your office? Do you need to be at a coffee shop? Where physically do you need to be? What do you need to have with you? Do you know that you should have breakfast before you do this? Do you want to have my thing was to have a latte. Do you want to have your coffee and your water? Like all the things have to be planned out in your ritual. How long? Is it 45 minutes? Is it 1 hour? And what supports do you need? So let's actually play with this for real. Type some things in the chat, write it down for you. I'm going to give you, let's even put some time on it. Let's go like 3 or 4 minutes. And I want you to write this out. How would it look? What kind of ritual would you like to have to do your deep work? And let's go about 3 minutes here. You have about 1 more minute to think, dream about it, and then share a few of your reflections in the chat, and I'll share some of mine. And also, oops, wrong way. Think about this. These things have to be part of your planning as well. Wildly important. How do you track it? How do you want to track it? And what is your system accountability? All right, I'll turn off this timer so it doesn't make noise at us. And Kelly, I'll let you type any reflections you'd want to have in the chat, and then we'll talk about them. Tiff, that was a great reflection. We'll talk about that. A couple of very good elements I like in there. And while Kelly's typing, okay, I want to say this before I do forget. Also, the deep work we have to remember is different from our shallow work. So most of what we probably do in our business is shallow. We can do it We can listen to something while we respond to scheduling emails. I could even put together my podcast. As long as I have the recordings done, I could put it together, type it all out, publish it. I could do that while I listen to something or watch TV. It's not deep work. I have learned how to do it. Deep work, for me would be writing marketing content for speaking engagements, or even honestly creating Canva graphics. Like I found I was trying to listen to a podcast while I was even just trying to put this together, and I couldn't do it. Because I don't have as much of that creative brain. That is actually hard for me. I want to think that it's easy, but it's really quite challenging for me. So the deep work is something above that level of what you currently know you can do that you're learning. So let's read these. So Tiff said, Wednesday is a light client day, so that would be a good day for deep work. My current deep work is reading a book about functional fitness. So she knows reading a book about learning something new is definitely a deep work activity. Like I don't know how many people can physically read a book and do something else, but in case you wanted to try to do that, not great. Best when you're warm and comfy downstairs on the couch, snuggled under a blanket with water nearby. Yes, the ritual of the how am I, where do I read best? I'm sure the other part of this is while the children are at school. And then I thought this was such a good self-knowing. My attention span would probably allow for 30 minutes, realistically. Yes, mainly because I don't do deep work and it feels hard, but I have the time and ability to make it 60 minutes or even a little bit longer eventually, and with practice. So that is something I was noticing as well. I tried taking myself to a coffee shop or somewhere new to work, and I'd be like, I gave myself 3 hours to be here and I am going to get all this work done. And my brain was tired after an hour. Like I have about an hour because I just can't. It's a lot. And so this awareness is big. You don't need to have 7 hours in a week to do your deep work. But if you have 30 solid minutes that you will actually ritualize and use as deep work without distraction or interruption, that can be huge. Kelly says the place is key. Yes. Natural light, good sitting and writing place. Is having my snacks and beverage a distraction? I mean, it depends if you're just going to start, enjoying your snacks and not doing your work. I don't know. I like snacks. That would be part of my ritual. And this one is really good too. Have my resources and my plan perhaps outlined. Yes. Knowing what you're going to do during your deep work is part of the ritual. If you go into it and you're like, I'm here, I have arrived. So, and this is what happens to me a lot is I sit down and I'm like, okay, I have the coffee, I have the blanket, and I have no plan. And then I sit there, I'm like, okay, I'll check Instagram, AKA I'll try to post something, which I'm not doing. And that's not part of my deep work anyway. Huge. So keep these in mind. We're going to keep scooting along here. Now comes the time blocking part that we sort of prepped a few weeks ago during group. So let's talk about this a little bit, because we want to think about deep work, shallow work, and busyness and life shallow work. Like I'm sure you need to make appointments for your kids. Like I have this running list of things that I need to do. And I tend to do them during work because I'm like, oh, look, I have time right now, but I could do it after work hours for myself. So time blocking your day, he suggests, but again, flexible, allow for 30-minute increments throughout your day. So starting by time blocking your actual work day. What time do you start working that you call your work day? And what time do you want to be done? I did laugh because in the book, he was like, everyone should be done by 5:30 p.m. And I was like, well, A, that doesn't apply because people have different work lives. But B, who's working till 5:30? It sure isn't me. So whatever your work day is, can you time block it in 30-minute increments? Then you classify activities, and we're going to do this. And Tiff, I know you got to leave in a relatively soon time. So we'll get through this. Classify your activities of the day. So you've got your time blockings, but then you got to make a list of like, what do I actually need to do today? Classify them. What's deep work? What's shallow work? Or busyness even. And then group similar tasks. So, what can be done in a similar brain space? And this is where I think we get caught up a bit. What tasks fall into the same brain capacity? I want to get through these four, then we'll sort of talk about them and allow for flexibility. His example was really great, which was you blocked off 2 hours to create your marketing something. And then you realize it's easily going to take you 4 hours. Like you thought it would take two, it's definitely going to take more, which this happens to me too. I think, oh, I can get this done quickly. Then when I start to do it, I'm not going to get it done as quick as I thought. So the flexibility of your time blocks is important. Do you have the ability to maybe roll into your next time block or just reschedule? He suggests in the book to do it if you're making an in the moment shift, to do it just right next to the time block that you wrote out and to just readjust and sort of refill it in as you go through. It's not that you have to stick exactly to your time blocks. It's allowing yourself the discipline to have some of the freedom of your time as well. So I want to share this I didn't know where to put it. This seemed like a good place to put it about email. And then we're going to talk about how to actually, we want to time block our days. So for your email, be more leading and direct. Example, you want to schedule something. We all have client businesses. We need to schedule things. Someone says, okay, what time works for you? You know how this conversation goes. But as you, the professional, and to save yourself the time, stress, and energy, you give a location, a date, or the times as the options. You just take the lead. So you're wanting to meet someone, and this used to be a thing when I was doing a lot of in-person networking. We would start the conversation by saying what works for you or what location or blah, blah, blah. And I got so sick of this back and forth. So I would just say this Starbucks on this day at this time. And I would give like 2 or 3 options. Most of the time, one of those times worked and we could just settle it in one back and forth. Or now what I do a lot, right, is have a calendar scheduling system. So can you have a calendar with your open times and then you just send that to people? And it eliminates so much of this back and forth because I've even found myself checking my email as my busyness activity and there's nothing there because I am much more efficient in how I'm doing my email. So it doesn't live there. Let's talk about time blocking. If you want to take a day, I know Tiff even did this. She showed me her time blocking sheet, which also, Tiff, before you go, do you have the link to those sheets? Because those looked pretty snazzy. She found these pretty neato time blocking sheets, and they're just like tear off pads, which I find oddly might be more satisfying than a planner. And it has room for time blocking and tasks. But we're going to spend the rest of our workshop time together, talking about time blocking and figuring out when and where you can do your busyness, your shallow work, and your deep work. So let's actually take this into practice. Take a day, could be tomorrow, could be an imaginary day, and do a time blocking. Also include things like drive time. I was doing this with my schedule and I have to go somewhere on Wednesday. And I was going to put a client in. And I thought, oh my God, no, I have to have time to drive. I'm not used to that part of it anymore. So drive time, lunch time, whatever it is that happens during your day, let's put it in your schedule. So Tiff did put the link in the chat if you want to see her little notes or the notepads. But let's do an imaginary time block. Let's take, another about 3 minutes or so, write it out, and then we're going to talk about what you found with your time block. Can you guys see? Did that pull up on your screen share? My Amazon? Okay. All right, Kelly, Tiff had to leave, so it's just you and me. Do you want to type in the chat or you want to come off mute and just dialogue a little bit?
Probably save us a lot of time to not have me type it out.
Yes, okay. Yes.
So interestingly, it's really interesting to just really, I just kind of feel a little bit at a loss. Is like, I know that this, when I write things down in a time like this, it's never going to be exactly like that, right? But it's a outline in a space.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting tomorrow, because I have a client bookending the day. So I have a client at 9:30 and then I have one at 4:30. And it was really funny when I went and looked at my calendar. I'm like, okay, I know it's going to lead up to the client in the morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much like do like by the half hour. Then, and obviously once I get to work, I know it's going to happen. The client, new client, I know that it's probably going to go over the hour mark, because it always does, but I can pretty much assume that by 11, she'll be on her way. And then it was kind of like pause, and I'm looking at, okay, blank slate from 11 until 4, which we have to leave back again. And this is usually what I do, is I'm usually, just, I don't plan the day, but I know things floating around that I have to do. And right now, one of the ones that are hanging out over my head that I keep wanting to get are taxes. So here's what I put. I said, 9:30 client. Then I had gone right to 11:30. Oh, I'll work out then. Then I'm like, oh, wait, back up 11 o'clock, drive home. Then I'm like, oh, wait, or will I work out at the office? So I'm doing that whole thing. Like, when am I
Yes.
going to eat? What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I might as well work out at the office because I have the space. Otherwise, I'm going home and like have to create the space.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, then there's lunch. And then I was like, that did not, so that I said 12:30 lunch, then I said 1 deep work. Like, that's when I'll buckle down and sit down and do my taxes. And I'm like, okay, this will be really interesting to see. If I have this to go by, it is going to motivate me to really try and stay on task instead of just floating around, which I think is going to be really good. Because then I gave myself an hour to do work on taxes.
Yep.
I might be able to do more, like if I find myself in a groove and I have that and all that, I'll keep going because I've got this window that something doesn't have to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But then I just thought, well, I'll put something down, so it's like this kind of, then I said 2 o'clock would be errands, house, family, just like the things you do. And then the kids start coming home.
Yep.
And then it just kind of feels like there's these interruptions and tending to them and seeing them and whatnot. And then by 4, I have to leave again to my client. And then it's straightforward with the clients, but it's
Yep.
these blank chunks of spaces that unless I have a thing to do,
Yep.
yeah. So and then I just said 6 o'clock, clean up the office, 6:30, I'm back home. And by then we're dealing with evening, dinner and getting the kids around and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And a few of the things that I think are really important in what you said is if I just have a few things, which is true, if I write down 1 or 2 options, or I pick one, and then I allow the flexibility of my time where maybe I have extra time if I'm done early or my attention span is over, awesome, but I might be able to keep going and I have the time. So that's the idea of the time block. But what happens to me is I'll say, oh, yeah, I have from 11 to 4. I have 5 hours. I'm going to get this done. And then I'm like, oh, yes, lunch. And then, oh, well, if I have lunch, then I'm not going to probably work out right after that. And then, well, I'll start this, but it's not, and I'm so much better if I say, okay, I give myself permission, have lunch for 30 minutes. It's in your time block. Drive. It's just a thing about writing it down. Now let's talk about, before we finish up, where do you think at least one of your deep work time blocks could go? And what is your current deep work?
Do you mean in tomorrow or
Nope, in general.
Like, yeah. I feel that it seems from what I've heard, like when you're creating a new habit or you're trying to do something, that bookending it next to something that's already set is actually a good way to do it. I do feel like I could focus more here than if I go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've said that in the past that I think that would work for me to try and put things together and quit having so much transition time.
Yep.
I might have lost. Are you there? Okay. You're frozen, but I think that's just, I don't know if that's because my sound is on.
You're good. I can hear you. You're a little frozen, but I can hear what you say.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I think that but then in light of things, like as I look at tomorrow, I'm saying, well, I was gonna work out here, then go home, have lunch. It's a 6-minute drive, but then I'll probably just sit down in a space that I'm already envisioning where all my tax papers are, because I don't want to be lugging that back and forth. So I suppose it truly depends on the thing I'm doing.
Yep.
That's that activity. But let's say we're writing a class. I think I'd rather be here because I have a bunch of books here. And again, it's just a space that's really, psychologically and physiologically related to work. And I think that could be really supportive to that,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good to just say out loud and just say, and I have the space and I'm paying for it. So why not use it,
Yeah.
I'm going to try muting myself and see if it helps our connection.
Okay, but when you mute, I can't hear you.
Right,
I'll mute myself. Ready? I'll mute me.
All right. So, okay, that helped. And I also just was checking. My connection looks strong, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna mute myself now, and then you can.
Got it. So to wrap up, I think the important key pieces, if we even let's take a zoom back through the very beginning and just sort of highlight each page here to remember some of the main events. Knowing the difference in your day-to-day, what is busyness, what is shallow work, and what's deep work. So even making a running list of like, I know these work tasks are shallow. I know, and that's kind of a weird phrase, but things that don't need as much focus. I know these are the busyness multitaskers that I could do when, when we talked about our time blocking in January, we talked about when do you have high levels of energy or focus? When do you have low levels? For me, doing some busy tasks or multitasking might be good at as the break between work and home, so when I'm done working, can I do some of those scheduling calls, almost like a break as well, but it's not during the day. Well, we'll just leave that task or that quote for us to remember, which is that the feeling when you task switch, you aren't getting it on either end fully. I mean, I can physically feel it in my body, I can feel it in my brain, and I know that I'm not getting either end really great, but I just still continue to do it a lot. So we talked about busyness. Are you being busy to look productive, or do you actually have clear indicators? That'll come up again. What is your shallow work? These are great quotes to refer back to. And like I said, the important ones for me here is to move beyond good intentions. So yes, you want to do deep work, but how can you actually make it happen so that you have to use less willpower? The 4 disciplines, so making it wildly important to you, not picking something that's just so-so, but it's very important. Measuring your time that you actually do it, not the time that you're not doing it. How can you keep yourself on track? And who, what, and how do you need to check in? How are you going to ritualize? How are you going to do your deep work? Where? For how long? What kind of support do you need? And then taking all of that knowledge into a time blocking. So classifying your work together, grouping similar tasks so that you're not doing that task switching back and forth, giving yourself time blocks, but allowing for flexibility with those time blocks. And that's it. What other reflections do you have? And we will wrap it up.
Perfect. I was just going to say that was great to recap everything, that I feel that where I would almost get more benefit to start with the time blocking is just to take that big chunk of empty space and not worry about the stuff that I know, like that's not a problem. It's nice to see, and as I think good practice, but I'm looking at that window of time where I'm not sure. And then with that, get really, go through all of those pieces you gave of the qualifiers, and then just go through, check the boxes, plan it, and practice with it. Like, again, like I think sometimes I'm really into that right now about the process, learning that we're not going to know how to do this perfect the first time. And there's always room for flow, but I really love that idea. And I love the idea of putting the intention there. And I love the idea of like having a ritual, like just put it into practice, get that muscle memory, just get in the habit, of kind of really setting your intentions about it instead of just like the showing up. Okay, here I am. Now what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was awesome. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And we had to end, of course, with dog barking.
That's perfect because I have a client coming at 1. So
Fabulous.
A little bit early wrap up. So thanks a ton. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll see you soon.
See you.